Well, we can turn to Labour now and talk to the Shadow Business Secretary, Jonathon Reynolds. I'm sure you were listening to that interview. Therese Coffey said that the Prime Minister was not aware of specific claims about the behaviour of Chris Pincher when he was made Deputy Chief Whip in February. What did you make of that?
Well, I thought parts of that were desperate, to be honest. I think we've got to acknowledge what the consistent problem is, and it is a Conservative Party that repeatedly chooses to do what is politically expedient over what is right, and that's whether it's the matter of those MPs that were charged with serious sexual offences, Charlie Elphicke and Andrew Griffiths, who were then let back into the Conservative Party because that was the short-term interest they adopted. It's clear from what we know this morning that Chris Pincher should never have been put back into the Whip's office. It's a wider pattern of behaviour too, isn't it? I mean, Owen Paterson breaking the rules and then having the Conservative Party seeking to redraw those rules to his advantage. And if you have a situation, no matter what else is going on, where people believe no matter what they do, they will not be held accountable to that because of their relationship to Boris Johnson or the position or the internal politics of the Conservative Party, I think you are asking for the kind of problems which they have got. And I'm so frustrated that, again, the whole reputation of politics and Parliament in this country is being besmirched by this.
I accept that the more recent cases have been skewed towards the Conservative Party. I do accept that. But there have been issues within the Labour Party as well, have there not? The majority of the MPs Conservative, but Mike Hill, Ivan Lewis, Calvin Hopkins, all Labour MPs who have resigned in the last few years over their conduct. The investigation to Calvin Hopkins didn't even reach a conclusion because it took so long that he resigned his membership. And the complainant in that case, Labour activist, tweeted to say that she hopes Keir Starmer listens to her concerns and fixes this broken system. Labour is also not squeaky clean on this, are you?
No, well, a case like that is not acceptable, and I can tell you it wouldn't happen again. As well as being the Shadow Business Secretary, I am a member of the Labour Party's National Executive Committee. I have the humility, Sophie, to know, yes, we have problems. I'm often a person who has to respond and deal with those. But I can tell you that we don't have what I observe in the Conservative Party, which is the repeated decision to make the wrong decision if that's in whatever short-term interest they perceive they have. I don't think they've taken these things seriously. I think they've made decisions which they shouldn't have made. I can't believe some of the things that are in the papers today about what the Prime Minister may have personally been aware of before he made decisions like this. But all the politics suffers. There's no doubt about that. It affects the reputation of us all, and that's what I find so frustrating. And I think it's right that people demand better.
You know, it feels kind of slightly depressing that, I do these interviews about these stories on a relatively regular basis. And I often ask people what should actually change in Parliament. And it feels as if people just don't come up with any answers. Therese Coffey was defending the use of bars, defending the use of MPs directly employing their staff. And I just wonder what your position is on that. 30 bars in the parliamentary estate, 6 in the House of Commons, the House of Lords. Is it now time to shut the bars?
Look, I don't think, Sophie, Parliament has the kind of modern workplace culture that it should have. I think there's further to go on that. But I would just say, if you look at these particular instances, actually few of them are in Parliament itself. So for me, it comes down to something bigger than the hospitality arrangements. It's about power, it's about accountability, it's about the standards that are set by the leader, by the leader of each political party. And I cannot see Boris Johnson as being the kind of person to somehow improve the culture of the Conservative Party. He himself, we don't even need to go through the things that he has been involved in.
So you don't, just to go back to the question, you don't think there's a need to shut Parliament's bars then?
Well, I think there is only one major bar for members of Parliament. There's a one for staff as well. I'm not sure the other ones are probably the restaurants. But no, I don't think that is the issue. I think the problem is not... You could shut every bar in Westminster, but if you've got a Conservative Party that does not take these issues seriously, that gives people a get-out-of-jail-free card...
But genuinely, I do think most people listening to this just won't understand. Lots of people work long hours, lots of people work late. Very, very few people work in workplaces where there is a drinking culture that is effectively encouraged because you have bars in Parliament.
Well, I wouldn't say it's encouraged. Most people are doing an incredibly professional job, and where there are, for instance, there's a bar for staff members, I think that is, to be honest, absolutely fine. And what I'm trying to say to you is, this is not the core of the issue. Okay. I think particularly that the Chris Pincher case, I understand, was at the Conservative Party's private members club, the Carlton Club. Okay. So there are other issues than the bars, and that cannot be the side issue. We've got to address the core of this, which is poor behaviour that's been set from the top.
What about the idea put forward by the Speaker that MPs should no longer directly employ their own staff, which would obviously make HR complaints easier if it's your direct line manager that is, the issue?
I'd have no complaints personally about that. I think as long as MPs are able to select interview and select the right staff members for them. I would also say the most important thing in any workplace...
Just to come in, if you don't mind, because you obviously are upset by this story. I get it. You've come on and very strongly explained why you find it troubling. But what do you think should change? I understand that you're going to give me an answer about the Conservative Party, but surely we should be looking at things that can practically change in Parliament to try and stop this kind of behaviour, or at least make a bit of a difference.
But for me, Sophie, it comes down to, are MPs going to be held accountable for their actions? Are they going to have the right standard of leadership set from the top? Is there going to be, some of the people we're talking about here...
Those are good words, but there's no actual change there, is there?
Well, there would be change if people took this seriously and therefore made decisions accordingly. If you have a situation where someone has resigned for a certain set of behaviours and you then appoint them not just to the Whip's office but to be in charge of the welfare of other MPs, well, of course that's the wrong decision. That's what needs to change, and that just clearly hasn't been a factor in the Prime Minister's considerations here at all. OK. There's, just to move on to some other issues now, there's chaos at the airports at the minute. Anyone trying to book a holiday will be very well aware of it. The government's come forward with some plans today where they want to fast-track security checks for baggage handlers to try and ease the staffing issues. Does Labour support that, or are you worried about any security risk? Well, I want to see the Department of Transport get a grip on this travel chaos. I saw that story last night. To be frank, I think they've probably just come up with that to try and get through the media round today. There seems to me to have been no planning at the stage of the pandemic that required it to look at what would happen when we came out of the pandemic in terms of the job losses that had taken place at airports in particular, about the complex relationship between the Home Office employees, the airline staff and the airport staff, to make sure we had the capacity to do it. So it feels like they're playing a little bit of catch-up today, but they do need to get a grip of it.
OK. And then just finally, Tony Blair said this week on a podcast that he supports what Keir Starmer is doing, but he then went on to say the central problem is what are the ideas that are going to stop this relegation and put the UK on an upward path. There's been a gaping great hole where ideas should be. Do you agree that there's been a gaping great hole where ideas should be?
No, I don't think there's been a gaping great hole, but I think Tony Blair's analysis of what this country needs in terms of having a plan to turn around the last decade of poor growth, poor productivity, downward pressure on wages is absolutely essential. I was doing a big speech this week at the Society of Motor Manufacturers Summit about how the state could be a partner to make sure we've got the battery factories that we need in order to make sure we continue to make electric vehicles in this country and don't lose out to competitors. And that is what is required. If you look at the Conservative Party, this government, what are they offering? Bring back imperial measurements, a trade war with the European Union. That is not the way forward. If you look at what we're saying, and of course we've got to develop this, it's that exciting long-term vision for industrial policy in this country to make sure there are good jobs and, of course, that we hit our climate change commitments. So I think he's right to say that's what this country needs, but I think Labour is the party offering that, and the government, frankly, have just run out of ideas.
OK, thank you very much for being on the programme today. Jonathon Reynolds there.